Is basically very practically oriented. It will hopefully help you to understand a lot of the very recent activities that have been going on the web, new kinds of businesses, new kinds of other activities. And this actually is the first time this has been presented openly. What we're going to present here, what I'll present here is partly based on many years of research by Professor Lee. I became involved about 5 years ago, so we've really been looking at this quite a long time. I especially looked at open source software as actually part of my own PhD dissertation, but this is really a lot bigger than that. It turns out open source software is just one example of these kinds of virtual community business models. So let me go ahead and get started. And basically, what I'd like to cover tonight, I'm going to talk about virtual communities, what that really means, and that's important to understand that. Then jump right into what are the business opportunities associated with that, because a lot of these communities have a very non-profit, common sense to them, and a lot of times, from a business perspective, you say, well, what good is that? Open source software is generally free. People get together on the web and they develop software and it's freely available. So where's the business opportunity there? So that's obviously an important aspect. We've actually come up with a series of 5 markets that we've identified for business applications of virtual communities. So we'll get into that a little bit. And the real crux of what I'll talk about tonight are the business models. And these revolve around the concept of hosting. And you'll see more of what's involved by that. Then I'll talk a little bit about how to actually go about planning a venture. It's a step-by-step process, and this might be interesting to use this afterwards in some of these materials, especially the different hosting models, as you brainstorm after I'm done. And a little bit about managing virtual community hosting businesses, because one of the interesting things about this is it's a really different kind of activity. And many of the businesses that have gotten into this have not understood that, and as a result have not done well. But slowly this is being learned, but hopefully we can give you a little head start in that process. So before I get started, I want you to start thinking about this, and these are some terms that I'm sure some of you have heard, maybe some of you have heard all of these. So I'd like to kind of get a sense of maybe get you involved, and if we could kind of go around and see who knows what a blog is. Blog. Okay. So clearly, anybody want to say what it is? It's a blog. Joel.
Okay, a blog is pretty much where people, it's kind of like a little community where people try to post their whatever topic they're talking about.
Right. Yeah, so it's it's like an open discussion forum. Sometimes it's called threaded discussion. It's actually short for weblog. So it's like a website, but where there's a log of discussion, right? Okay. Wikis. Who knows what a wiki is? You're not allowed to go to this. Okay. There.
It's like a website where you can share knowledge on particular topic.
Yeah, you could. You can do it, but you can do a lot of things with it. What's the essence of a wiki? What does wiki mean? Wiki means fast. That's right. That's the origin of the word. But in terms of the web, wiki.
Kind of not knowledge, right?
Yeah, but it's something specific. Yes.
It's software created to collaborate among different people, different groups, and everything.
Yes, that's true. But it's user generated. Okay. And I'm going to give you an example of a wiki when we get into it. A wiki is basically a website where you can go and make changes yourself. If we turned on the Wikipedia right now, you could go and go there and hit the edit button, and you make the change right now. So that's the quick part of it. But the interesting thing part of it is that, gee, anybody can contribute to this at any time. It's very easy. It's a very interesting concept. But of course, then you say, well, how good is the stuff that's on there? Gee, I don't know. All these people have been playing with it and fooling with it. So, but there's some issues about that. So, virtual worlds. I think you all know
Anybody
that,
that's
right?
raised their hand.
What's a good example of a virtual world? You all know that. Social networking. What's social networking? Okay.
Sites like Facebook, MySpace,
Right.
LinkedIn.
Perfect. Right. And what is it? And what is the networking about? It's what?
Social sites where people go interact, chat, talk, email, share.
Right. Share, meet people. Right. Okay. Open source software. I already said that. Give me an example of open source software. Anybody have the name of an open source software? Linux, right? Another one? I bet you guys use it. Mozilla, Firefox? How many use Mozilla Firefox? Well, you're using open source software. That was created by these communities.
Also the Mac, the operating system on the Mac is VDX Unix, which is open source.
Yep. Online auctions. Yes. eBay, right? ALS? ALS. I hadn't heard of that. Okay. So auctions where you can exchange, you can buy, sell. If you have an old printer, you want to get rid of it, you can put it on there. User-centered innovation. What is that? Anybody heard that term?
Decentralized.
In a sense, but okay, this is kind of a buzzword that's been going around the last 3, 4, 5 years that says innovation really needs to come more from the user, or you need the user more involved in the innovation than just some expert in a corporate white tower somewhere or some engineer. So it's the whole idea of users getting involved and being part of innovation. So that's what that's about. MMORPGs. Anybody know what that stands for? You know what it is? Is it games? They're games, right.
Online game.
They're online. It's massively multiplayer online role-playing games. So a lot of people get together online and they play roles. Typically, you're like EverQuest, World of Warcraft. Has anybody played those games? Willing to admit it?
Willing to admit
Well,
it.
anybody admit to playing those games? Okay, how about Folksonomies? Who's heard of the word Folksonomy? All right. How about social bookmarking? Heard of social bookmarking? Okay, interesting. See, this is more recent stuff. Have you ever heard of Dig or Delicious? Dig or Delicious? All right. You're going to hear about it, okay? We'll talk about that. I'll give you a little more background on that. Finally, peer-to-peer file sharing. What's that? I think so. What do you do on
You share songs.
songs? Right. Place to get songs, right? There'll be a lot of people. Sometimes legally, sometimes not. So what you see here is generally talked about as Web 2.0, which is in a sense the second generation of the web. It is the next step and the next stage beyond basic static websites. What is often talked about as e-commerce. So in e-commerce, a company puts a website up and you can go there and buy things and that's fine. I mean, that's, the basic start of the web. But the second generation, which has really come into being in the last 3, 4, 5 years, called Web 2.0, as you can see, is quite a list of different kinds of things, the new things that some of you have never heard about, and some of you have. Well, what I'm going to show you tonight is going to help you to make sense of this, because it turns out that essentially, we almost view it as like a code. We feel like we've sort of cracked the code here. And the code meaning, as business people, whether you're entrepreneurs or you're corporate managers, how do you take advantage of this? How do you make money off of this? How do you turn this into a business opportunity? And there's two important things that you must understand to make that connection. One is you need to understand what exactly is a virtual community, because underneath all of these are virtual communities. Secondly, you have to understand what it means to host a virtual community. And it turns out that so far we've identified 15 different models for hosting virtual communities. And as you'll see, the neat thing is not only does this provide you a very interesting checklist of the possibilities for how you can make money and how you can build a business around these kinds of activities, but once you realize they're all the same basic kind of thing, you can mix and match them. And that's where the real power comes in, because rather than just saying, well, gee, I see MySpace.